Our first speaker of the day, oddly enough, is not in the room. But David Carr, DTM, we're speaking on a topic, visionary communication, level 5, demanding expertise. Prepare to speak professionally. David has 18 to 20-minute presentation. You haven't gotten your coffee, get it now. David.
Right. Thank you, Toastmaster of the Day, Mark. So my name is David Carr. I am the founder of 100% Online Club, but I also treasure the in-person Toastmasters experience, as well as this mix, which can be challenging at times, of doing hybrid meetings. But one of the things I want to talk to you about today is some of what I have learned from my own experiences and from other people about delivering speeches online and doing it more effectively. And before I get too deep into that, I have some questions for you. Now, if we were all online, I'd say everybody should enter what they think into the chat, their response to this into the chat. Since we have a bunch of people in the room, you can just shout out your answer, but what is the most challenging thing you find about online presentations? Is it the distractions of technology and selecting the right screen and some of the stuff that we were just going through a few moments ago? Is it creating engagement with that online audience when people are remote and you don't have as much eye contact or verbal feedback? And humor in particular can be a little bit more of a challenge online, where you don't hear whether your jokes are landing necessarily. Hopefully, if people have their cameras on, you can at least see that they're smiling. Or is it something as simple as keeping track of the timing, losing track of the time? Who would like to volunteer something about what it is that they have found most challenging about online? Anything in particular? Anybody from the room?
David, Mark, creating engagement with the audience.
Great.
And I think creating engagement is probably the fundamental thing that can be more difficult in an online format. And I'm going to talk about a few different techniques that you can use. One is to ask for engagement. It's sort of like how salespeople talk about you have to ask for the sale. You can't just say how wonderful something is. You have to ask people to sign on the dotted line. And sometimes when you're online, you may have to ask for engagement. Ask people to shout out answers to a question or put something in the chat or respond to a poll. But second on the list I put down is your close-up, which is a reference to, I'm ready for my close-up, Mr. DeMille. Have your face on screen a good part of the time. Don't hide behind slides. I think there is a tendency for people to say, if I'm doing an online presentation, then it has to be a slideshow. It can be a slideshow or it can be partly a slideshow, but don't underestimate the power of putting your face on the screen. I mean, maybe not my face, but some of you have good faces and good smiles and good facial expressions that are more powerful than any special effect. Now, you may want to use some technical tools, some presentation technologies, but I talk about focused razzle-dazzle, as opposed to just making it a special effects extravaganza. Use the techniques, use the on-screen effects that are going to help make your point for you, and use a little bit of variety along the way. So, something as simple as shifting the image from the left side to the right side can be a way of creating visual variety. I mean, you can do it with your body language and other methods as well. But one of the experts on webinar presentations who we brought in to speak at Online Presenters and at EVVCon and VTMCon on a number of occasions is a guy named Roger Corville. He talks about research coming out of Hollywood and Madison Avenue about how often something has to change on screen just to hold people's attention. And so variety is something that can be useful, changing of the scene, and take risks. Well, you're going to hear a little bit more about that in just a moment. Now, I did want to mention that Online Presenters is holding what we call our webinar contest. We're doing an invitational event where you're invited to come and participate. So none of the club members are going to be participating in that contest. We had our own contest a couple of weeks ago. We're trying to bring in the best speakers from elsewhere who have learned how to be effective in the online medium and give them a chance to compete. And we give a big chunk of points. This is sort of a hacked version of the International Speech Contest with a big chunk of points for creating engagement with the audience, finding a way of doing that, taking advantage of the online medium and overcoming its limitations. And we know that this can be done because we have had a couple of years of online only contests, as well as last year, there was a hybrid event where some people were on stage and some people were remote. Now, the gentleman you see in the upper left there is Mike Carr, no relation that I'm aware of, but Mike was the world champion of public speaking in 2020, which was the year that things abruptly went online. And so he had to transform his speech, come up with a good speech for giving online. And the way he opens it is he is mostly off screen and he is dragging back the corner of the screen. He is using the frame of the webcam as a prop, where the frame of the webcam becomes the gate of the door cell, where Black Bart is dragging back the jail cell gate. And he's using this as part of a story about, well, you should see the whole speech. It's the librarian and Mrs. Montgomery. And I will post some resources about Mike Carr in the chat. The gentleman on the bottom, that is Alexander Mate, who won second place in the World Championship last year as a remote participant when several other people were on stage. And he also made inventive use of the camera frame. You see him right there trying to hand a piece of his grandmother's no-bake cake through the screen to you. That was part of his story. So it doesn't have to be technology techniques that you would use to make a strong impression, although it can be. Now, I'm going to show you a really basic technique that you can use to be more effective when you are using slides or using screen sharing at some point. And hopefully I'll do this without embarrassing myself. But when I click here, this is what I saw a few moments ago when I was getting warmed up. So this is when you click the screen sharing button at the bottom of Zoom, that big green button, it brings up this dialog and it asks, which screen do you want to share? And I will leave that up on screen for several seconds before I am ready to actually start sharing. And then I can click stop share and put myself back on screen, have a little bit more face time with my audience to make an impression. And I suggest doing that probably at the beginning of your speech. You want to have your face on screen and be making a connection with the audience. And you might want to have that at the conclusion of your speech, not just have a bunch of slides on screen, but be showing people the personal connection that you're trying to make with them by looking straight at the webcam, trying to create that illusion of eye contact, but having a face-to-face interaction as opposed to just sharing slides. But I do have some slides to share, or actually a little bit of video to share with you along the way. And so this is one of the Techy tools that I use. This is called OBS Studio. And this gives you a little film studio kind of built into your computer where you can switch between different scenes. And there are several different tools of this type that allow you to rearrange what is presented. They take over your webcam and present exactly what you want to present. There's another commercial one called Prezi. I use OBS Studio because it's free and open source, and I do like free things, although I'll spend on stuff where it makes sense. So these are some of the Techy tools that you can use. But Techy isn't necessarily the beginning and end of it. So this is a clip from a video interview that I did with Mike Carr for the EVVCon event last year. And I'm pretending that it's a speech that was meant to be given on stage and we just happened to be recording it. This is your speech that you designed to be wonderful and effective online. Do you have any advice for the people who will be competing in that about how they should craft it, how they should think through the process?
Yes. Take risks. If David Carr has told you you can do X, do 2X. Anywhere your imagination can go, try it, because I did not believe that I could win the World Championship of Public Speaking that year for a number of reasons. Other people in the contest where I fell in the contest. And so what I was just trying to do was to create a video that I could use for industry that said something, that really said something into the world. And that was it, because I knew that I was not going to win. And so I took risk. And it was that very thing that judges and everyone else came back and said, oh my goodness, that was the differentiator.
Now, by the way, there's a part that I cut out there where I'm saying to Mike, gee, I don't know whether I want people to use every possible risky thing that they should use, every possible special effects in their presentation, but that was his advice. Now I'm going to show you a clip of the actual presentation that he gave at that event, as well as one from Kat Mulvihill, who gives a very different sort of presentation, but you'll see some of the techniques that she uses to create engagement in a speech that was actually about creating engagement online.
Thank you for joining me here in my library. It's so great to be with you. I've really enjoyed talking with David. And of course, I love this whole idea about virtual presentations. We're able to get with all of you wonderful people right here across the top. But let me ask you a question. What is it that we are really trying to do in virtual presentations? Well, I think that we are probably wanting to say something in an entertaining way while building rapport and a connection with our audience, aren't we? So that our audience remembers what we say, but also they stay engaged. And in that way, virtual is no different than anything else. And that's why I'd like to talk to you about this cowboy hat right here.
Sorry, I'm going to stop for just a moment because I don't think I was sharing the sound properly.
Cowboy hat is my granddad's.
Now, my favorite way to engage with people at the start of a meeting, a presentation, or speaking engagement is a poll. And I'll use an example. Let's say I am doing a presentation on speaking, and I ask my audience at the start, what presentation skill are you most interested in developing? Maybe it's working on verbal tics or filler words like ums and ahs. Maybe it's speaking without a script. Perhaps it's building confidence in your speaking, or it's encouraging audience engagement. How do you get more engaged with your audience? A poll question like this serves multiple purposes. So if we think about the early, easy, and clear, I can put this up right at the start. I've covered the early. Easy, most of us know how a poll question works. There's one question and you have answers, and everyone has to pick an answer that suits them best. It's also quite clear what I am expected to do in that situation.
So hopefully you're starting to see there where some of these techniques are being used. And I borrowed from Camp Mulvihill the idea of opening with a quiz, and I'm using some of the same online screen sharing techniques that she was using there. And Kat has taught classes or has YouTube videos available on OBS Studio. I think she uses a Mac equivalent of that software to add visual variety to the screen. But part of the point there is that it's not necessarily techie techniques that you need to learn. And if you do decide that you want to learn some of these software techniques, I'm not saying that you should go out and use all of them or learn all of them. I would learn one or two things that you can do effectively. And it might be as simple as sharing slides more smoothly and going between slide sharing and having your face on screen. It might be getting up out of your chair and using some effective body language to create more excitement and more engagement in your speech. Or it may be using the camera frame differently, using OBS Studio, or using the webcam software of your choice. The point ultimately is to create that engagement with the audience, to get your message across, and to think about how you can use the online medium more effectively to connect with your audience, whether it's all online or whether it's mixed between the people who are in person and online. And with that, well, I'm ready for my close-up, I think. And I'm going to share some things in the chat, some links to where you can see the full videos of Mike Carr and Camp Mulvihill. I think they're worth watching, as well as a link to the online presenters website. So I'm going to share it through the chat. Not everybody's on chat. Not everybody's in the room. So I have to think about how I'm going to adapt doing that. So what I'll do is I will also send this out to everybody who was registered for this event. I'll send it out by email so that you have access to those resources. And with that, I would think that I was out of time by now. No, apparently not. May I ask if there are any questions from people in the room or on the audience, on the online audience?
I have one, David.
Yes, sir.
I use Zoom all the time, but I don't use the bells and whistles. How difficult is this software program that you're talking about that is free, and I like free too, for someone as green as I am to do some of what you did?
Yeah, I mean, OBS Studio is a little bit, technically challenging, built by techies for people who do a lot of streaming video production.
I'm out. Never mind.
There's one called Prezi that if you're willing to spend I think there is a free version of Prezi that you can try out. It has like a little watermark, so the Prezi logo will be in the corner of the screen. I think that one is a little bit more user-friendly. You can find good tutorials on both of them. I am cheating a little bit. I have this little gadget. I said I liked free, but this cost me a couple of $100. This is called a Stream Deck. And this allows me to just push a button to change from one scene to another in OBS. And it also serves as a tool for advancing my slides. But I actually think you should not get too fancy. You should maybe you do a speech where you're trying something out and that's part of the point of the exercise for you. But, learn one or two things that you can use effectively and try and use them in as effective a way as you possibly can.
Okay.
A few times there in that sentence. Any other quick question? Because we do need to close this out.
I have a question real fast, David. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
My question is, Zoom allows you to do an advanced presentation where you have a PDF or PowerPoint and you put yourself in the picture. Is that an alternative to using OBS and Prezi?
Yeah, right, it is. So that's sort of one of the more available things is there actually are some bells and whistles built into Zoom where you can do different styles of presentations. Even with that, you do need to think about practicing it. I see sometimes people have their face on the screen, but it's covered up by other widgets on the screen. And so that's not necessarily as effective as it might be either.